Even after humans die, weapons remain. This exquisite creation can take a human life at any moment. Yet humans desperately need weapons, just like this group, exerting all their effort just to find a single sword. Legend has it that whoever possesses the demon sword gains immense power. The extremely wealthy long for it. They appoint the richest among them to search for this sword. Its value comes from being forged with the blood of demons. Whether this is true or merely a legend is unknown. 2,000 years ago in the Roman era, barbarian hordes attacked a small village outside the Roman Empire. The villagers, unprepared, were quickly massacred. The village priest prayed for divine help, but was ignored. So they turned to sacrificing the village sheep and praying to demons. In response, a lone knight was sent. His weapon, the demon sword. As soon as the young man drew the sword, the battle ended in an instant. As the barbarians left, the villagers took turns thanking the knight. But they forgot they prayed not to gods, but a demon. The knight didn't come to save the villagers, but to annihilate life. Though just a legend, it terrifies anyone who hears it. As the group ventured deeper into the tomb, they discovered a miraculous light. It emanated from the demon sword they were seeking. However, before they could rejoice, another group arrived. A battle ensued. A man hastily grabbed the sword but soon stood frozen. Seconds later, a guard's head was severed from his body. The sword transformed the man into a bloodthirsty demon. Ikijo had no choice but to use his divine powers to slay the man. Then, manager Miura picked up the sword and secured it. Back home, he added it to his collection. In the blade's reflection, he saw the faces of the dead, a twisted joy that Ikijo couldn't bear. He excused himself to sleep to leave, but was called back for favors. No one wanted to continue this work. Elsewhere, an armed group stormed a yacht, demanding its owner hand over the sword. Just as he struck, the sword swallowed him. The yacht was stained with the red of fire. Simultaneously, the demon sword reacted. Manager Miura, witnessing this, hastily went inside. Lured by the dazzling light, he couldn't resist and picked it up. Of course, such individuals are easily manipulated by the sword. Miura instantly turned into a demon. He rushed towards the guards like a gust of wind. Even bullets couldn't stop Miura. As time passed, the corridor was filled with dead bodies. Miura vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, in another family, a woman reads a book, awaiting the birth of her first child. Even her husband couldn't hide his excitement. But the sword whimpers in the night. This time, the temple had to chant together to suppress the Shiryu sword. Over time, a monk left his position and approached the sword. He used his blood to drench the cloth covering the sword. Unexpectedly, as the sword was about to be subdued, the cloth disappeared. The monk grabbed Shiryu and licked it. He turned into a bloodthirsty, eyeless monster. The temple was slaughtered. The more blood the sword absorbed, the stronger it became. After returning from the hospital, the couple happily went shopping. As the husband was about to reveal the name they planned for their child, he stopped. Blood poured from his head. Takashi had been killed by the sword. The wife immediately ran to her husband, crying and calling his name, then glared at the monk with hatred. He, unconcerned, walked onto the main street. He killed uncontrollably, causing everyone to run in panic. Only when the sword had its fill of blood did the monk return to normal. Before he could comprehend his actions, he was stabbed from behind by the pregnant woman. Her belly seemed affected too. As she went on a rampage, she suddenly calmed down. The grief-stricken girl hid in an alley, clutching the sword. Both seemed to struggle for control. When the street lights went dark, the pregnant woman stepped out and saw a girl returning from work. Fortunately, she controlled herself upon seeing the child in the girl's womb. Despite trying to discard the sword, the pregnant woman couldn't. She was even horrified when she saw a demon's reflection in the mirror. Back with Miura, the Shashirai's soldiers asked him to drop the sword, but were attacked instead. The demon's sword destroyed their advanced weapons. Another man, Flamberge, who shared the goal of destroying the world, took the sword. However, there can't be two kings in one country. The two, empowered by their swords, enhanced their armor and clashed. Flamberge was no match for Miura. The sword held by the pregnant woman was dismantled, but she hung herself, leaving behind her newborn. When the man picked up the child, the sky shone brightly as if humanity's hope had appeared. Years passed and life went on calmly, the once abandoned boy grew into a teenager. Sayaka, lost in thought, was invited by friends to a newly opened karaoke place for lunch. Yet, Sayaka declined again. Later, her friends asked about Ishii, who had confessed his feelings to her. Popular among girls, Ishii was rejected by Sayaka. She didn't know what to say, just apologize. After school, Sayaka was escorted home by Tatsumi. On the way, they encountered Guy, who remained silent. Sayaka ran after him to thank him for saving her, but he didn't respond. Guy seemed uninterested in her, yet didn't like being bothered by Sayaka. Tatsumi got angry when Guy barely touched her. Guy let himself be knocked down but showed no remorse. At that moment, Sayaka's father arrived. The Shiryu sword was demanding more blood, so they hurried to conduct another purification ceremony. As usual, the master took Guy to the mountains to worship his late mother. Having adopted him a decade ago, the master wanted to pass on his knowledge to Guy, whose only wish was to become a blacksmith. At moonset, Guy went to the Shiryu sword and opened its sheath, considering it his mother. In the grand hall, people celebrated the artifacts set for auction. Mickey forgot his task and indulged in eating and drinking. He met a knowledgeable, wheelchair-bound young master, expert in wines. The young man realized he wasn't interested in the auction. Suddenly, while raising a toast, the auctioneer called out Mickey's name. After the first auction session ended, everyone moved to the second hall to admire other artifacts. Mickey approached a sword with exquisite engravings. Through his technologically advanced eyes, he could determine if the sword was authentic or not. The man in the wheelchair also had his eyes on this sword, once wielded by the legendary alchemist Paracelsus. He had sold his soul to a demon to perfect the Philosopher's Stone. However, Paracelsus reneged and did not surrender his soul. The enraged demon was defeated by humans. The Philosopher's Stone sealed it and was placed on the Azov sword. After the auction, Marcus returned to his car and confirmed that the sword was genuine. Tatsumi informed his master about Guy being with Shiryu. However, the master wasn't worried because Guy had always firmly held the sword. He wanted Tatsumi to realize how dangerous Guy was. He would be bound to the sword until it cleaved him in two. The next day, the ritual to pacify Shiryu took place. All disciples were blindfolded. Guy approached his master, waiting for Sayaka to bring the sword. The master handed Guy a small knife. As usual, Guy cut his hand and dripped blood on the sword. Tatsumi, unable to bear Guy being more special, disobeyed and removed his blindfold. At that moment, the demon in the sword escaped and entered Sayaka. To protect Tatsumi, Guy lost an arm. Sayaka regained consciousness and then fainted. A week later, the pain from Guy's lost arm persisted. Sayaka didn't understand what happened at the calming ceremony. Her father, unwilling to explain, avoided her. Not wanting to see her friend suffer, Sayaka hugged him. But Guy ran to his mother's grave, vowing to kill her. His hatred for his mother deepened. When he fainted, the master returned to the sword, asking it to protect Guy. After all, they had been together since Guy's birth. To increase Shiryu's power, he fervently attempted to destroy the sword. A few days later, the second auction began. Marcus, upon seeing the sword, unhesitatingly bid 500,000. Unable to accept defeat, Mickey doubled the bid. Each time Marcus raised the price, Mickey bid even higher. Ultimately, Mickey won. After completing his mission, he rushed back to Shoshidai during the night. Unexpectedly, on that secluded road, Marcus used his car to block the way. He wanted to know why this man was so desperate for the sword. If Mickey refused to hand it over, Marcus would resort to violence. Two burly men stepped out of the car. But Mickey wasn't scared. He quickly took down the two hefty men. Suddenly, as he turned, Miura appeared. Kyoko was surprised to see her former acquaintance there. Mickey had heard rumors, so he wasn't too shocked. It was only when he saw the man wielding the demon sword that he got scared. Kyoka urged Mickey to leave, but he refused and drew his own thunder sword. That night, Guy's severed arm grew back, but it had turned into iron. Back to the fight, Miura unleashed his strongest form and cornered Mickey. Unable to win, Mickey struck a lightning blow with a thunder sword. Mickey narrowly escaped death, but lost the Azov. It seemed Marcus had seized the opportunity to steal it. The next morning, Guy knelt before his master, puzzled why he used Shiryu on him. The master recounted the events of 10 years ago. Now it served as Shiryu's guardian. Guy obeyed his master's order. He lit a fire and chopped off the sheath of Shiryu, throwing it into the flames. Tatsumi, still upset about Guy being chosen, knew Shiryu was a living sword and couldn't be entrusted to ordinary people. The master understood this, but had yet to forge a perfect sword. He hoped Shiryu would enable Guy to create what he had always dreamed of. Even after obtaining the sword, Marcus couldn't stop dreaming about the demon inside it. The ancient magical teachings were not fabricated. To seek revenge, Marcus would do anything to control the sword. In his regret, the voice of his sister brought him back to reality. Marcus's family doted on him greatly, especially his sister who adored him. However, in response to this warmth, Marcus could only sigh. It turned out this family was just hired by him. When Marcus loudly ordered them to leave, he returned to his dark, empty room. He went to his room and drew a summoning circle for the sword. Yet, despite Marcus's pleas, the sword did not respond. He was unaware that Shashidai was monitoring him because of the theft. 2 years ago, Marcus lost both his parents and sister. Now he encountered his ex-girlfriend, who had fallen in love with someone else and was about to get married. Marcus wanted to attend the wedding but couldn't. He just watched his girlfriend walk away. He remembered when the three of them used to play together. Both had claimed to love Marcus the most, but eventually betrayed him. Losing everything important, Marcus was filled with rage. The sword sensed his bloodlust and sprouted. In his panic, it entered him in the dark of night. Tatsumi, as usual, followed Sayaka as she returned home. He declared that he had rejected a matchmaking meeting to be with her forever. But Sayaka was indifferent. Just then, Tatsumi rushed to hold Sayaka back. He revealed his true nature, forcing her against a tree to commit vile acts. At that moment, Guy appeared. With just a light tap, he knocked Tatsumi to the ground. Then Guy's eyes turned entirely red. As he was about to kill Tatsumi, Sayaka screamed. This calmed Guy down, but he couldn't bear the screeching sound from his arm. Only when Sayaka hugged Guy did Shiryu calm down. Erika and Tanabe's wedding took place secretly, just as she said. As they were exchanging rings, Marcus appeared, shattering the happy atmosphere. To the shock of the two betrayers, Marcus stood up on his own legs. Master Ammon, because of this story, had to leave his mansion temporarily. The girl entrusted with delivering the sword had to ask her disciple to safely store the spear Tambakiri. Tatsumi overheard their conversation. With the power of the Azoth sword, Marcus became incredibly strong. He charged at the betrayers like a whirlwind. As he was about to kill them, Mickey intervened. He probably realized Marcus was being controlled by the sword. The stone imprisoning the demon turned into a shadow and escaped while they were distracted. As Tanabe and Erika were fleeing, Marcus changed in time. The fleeting image of a happy Erika brought Marcus back to his senses. Mickey arrived late but managed to calm Marcus a bit. Afterwards, Mickey took him back to headquarters for examination. In reality, Marcus only knew the legend of the sword, but not its power. Azoth can transform human sorrow into a desire to kill enemies, as with Tatsumi, who is now consumed by Tambakiri. As Guy was forging a sword, Tatsumi, with eyes completely white, attacked him. He had become a wild demon. Shashidai is a place where those chosen by the swords gather and undergo a deep sleep before controlling their powers. Untrained, Guy didn't know this and desperately resisted his bloodlust despite the attack. To protect him, Shiryu transformed Guy into a weapon. The two engaged in a frenzied battle. Ammon, sensing the murderous intent, returned to the mansion, but only found Sayaka unconscious. The two had gone into the deep forest for a more uninhibited battle. Marcus was brought back to Shashidai. Kyoka guided him, reassuring that he would be protected here. Everyone warmly welcomed the new member. Mickey, on the other hand, was taken for a checkup. His body had almost entirely lost its human structure, evolving as if turning Mickey into a ghost. Currently, Marcus was being interrogated by the three heads of Shashida. They wanted to know what he remembered while possessed. However, Marcus only had memories of darkness. Despite the lack of information, the heads praised him, declaring that they are the only ones who can save Marcus, and he is the key to humanity's future. After his treatment, Mickey kissed his girlfriend. They hadn't been intimate for a long time while working there. Mickey worried Mina would find someone else during his deep sleep. Though uncertain of the future, he still hoped to wake up for their record-breaking kiss. Today, the sky was redder than usual. Guy wandered through the city filled with the undead, searching for Tatsumi. Tatsumi merged with Tambakiri, gaining superior abilities. Guy, attacked from above, managed to escape. He then thrust a spear straight through Tatsumi, a scene monitored from an airplane. After interrogation, Marcus was reunited with Mickey. He embraced him like a child. Kyoka took them to where Azoth was stored. Soon after, she received orders about Guy's appearance. But even the machine's bullets couldn't harm him. Kyoka couldn't gauge this person's strength. After a fierce battle, Guy returned to normal with Shiryu. But then, he began choking himself. To prevent Guy from falling into darkness, his master sacrificed his own hand. Shashidai had now amassed many powerful weapons, their strengths beyond human comprehension. Those possessed and merged with the swords are known as chrysalis, implying they will become cocoons and hibernate like the centuries-old swords. If unable to hibernate, their evolutionary process accelerates. Chrysalis become Busoma, a form merged with the sword. Like Miura now, who can wield the sword at will, driven only by murderous intent. Miura's target is a prison for the most heinous criminals. He wants to consume the hatred within these people, making the sword stronger with each accumulation. Unaware of what happened, Marcus was put in a glass cage for hibernation. Meanwhile, another chrysalis, Ikijosaya, was released. In the morning, Sayaka went looking for Guy but couldn't find him. Tatsumi, despite a sword wound, survived, consumed by vile thoughts. Contrary to Guy, who after the incredible battle acted skittishly. He didn't speak and behaved like a little puppy. Guy played outside with butterflies, but his arm caused the butterflies to disintegrate. Ikijo woke up after 16 years and 24 days, meeting Kyoka for the first time. The previous manager, Murua, had been corroded by the sword. Sayaka and her father came looking for Guy, but he didn't respond. Seemingly to avoid Shiryu's power, he had become childlike. Ikijo's power is Vishnu, the supreme deity. He was ordered to search for Guy, who had caused chaos the day before. Kyoka, working with Ikijo for the first time, had only heard bits and pieces of stories. Ancient Indian epics tell of a country that enraged the gods. Carrying a ring of light, a deity punished the king and his people, turning their vast kingdom to dust. The ring of light, a divine weapon, was left behind and sealed. Ikijo is the only one who can wield the chakram, making him the strongest in Shashira. Returning to Guy, he wandered aimlessly before stopping at a statue. As it began to rain, Guy started sobbing uncontrollably. Remembering her father's words, Sayaka comforted him, knowing he needed a moment of tranquility. Her father returned to his blacksmith work, still unable to create a sword capable of cutting through human consciousness. The decision to forge Shiryu within his disciple stirred controversy. Although a bold move, Amin knew that Shiryu was Guy's guardian since birth, the only thing capable of slicing through his consciousness. However, rumors suggested that Shiryu might have a twin sword, and the one with Guy was significantly weaker. The stronger version could exist somewhere else. At another shop, a woman close to Amin and her disciple were forging an incredibly sharp sword. She adored the beauty of sharp blades, even fearlessly licking them. Her fascination made her disciple extremely nervous. She even desired to be cut by her disciple to experience the sword's sharpness. That night, Sayaka sewed a new outfit for Guy. While she was changing, someone was watching intently. On the festival day, Sayaka took Guy through every nook and cranny. They played various games and enjoyed food together. Back at the girl's sharpening shop, a strange customer brought in his sword for sharpening, paying a large sum for expedited service. Unaware, the girl didn't realize the sword was Shiryu, appearing unscathed. As she sharpened it, a shrill noise emerged, and suddenly an eye popped out of the sword. Kiyomi was possessed by the demon inside, driven by a thirst for blood. Realizing the photo of Amin was destroyed, Kiyomi quickly instructed her disciple to leave until she called. The more Kiyomi sharpened the sword, the louder its screams became. It needed more blood, and she reluctantly used her own to appease Shiryu. In the still night, Miura sat alone, playing the piano unheard. At that moment, his old enemy reappeared. Swords sought each other out to determine the stronger. The fire sword had once lost to the demon sword. Now they would settle the score in this final battle. Not far away, two other Busomas watched the duel, admiring the sharpness of the demon's sword. Ultimately, the demon's sword emerged victorious. After the festival, Sayaka took Guy to a temple to pray for divine protection. She hoped to spend more time with Guy, but upon returning, Tatsumi appeared. He had followed the butterfly on Sayaka's shirt. Shiryu instinctively raised its hand in defense. As Tatsumi was about to cut off Sayaka's head, a ring flew out. Ikijo had found what he was hunting. After sharpening Shiryu, Kiyomi was exhausted. The customer left quickly, knowing this. Ikijo and Tatsumi were engaged in a fierce fight. Guy's arm reacted too. Ikijo's ring trapped Tatsumi, shattering him into pieces. As Ikijo was about to leave, he stopped. Shiryu's eye was fixated on him. He was the true target. Ikijo immediately pushed Guy away, with Sayaka rushing to protect him. But they were no match for Ikijo. At that moment, Mr. Kaitsu appeared. He let the three into his house and questioned what Shoshidai wanted with the boy. Ikijo was just following orders. If Guy became a Busoma, he would illuminate him. Having lived so long, Kaitsu was familiar with many like Ikijo. Then, a large, strange-looking man approached. He was Soin from Gabai, an organization similar to Shoshidai. Since a forest can't have two tigers, they immediately clashed. Sayaka, sensing trouble, asked Mr. Kaitsu to intervene, but he was keen on watching the fight to the death. Initially, Ikijo underestimated his opponent, but soon had to use his chakra. One of them would have to die. Fingers from Soin's shadow unexpectedly sprouted. Seeing this, Guy threw a rock at it, accidentally hitting Soin's leg. Soin turned away, abandoning the fight. He shoved Sayaka aside and grabbed Guy by the neck. Unexpectedly, a Busoma emerged from the shadows and stabbed Soin. This was the prey he had pursued multiple times, seemingly just waiting for the right moment to ambush. The Busoma then hurled a knife at Guy. As Guy's body was wounded, he couldn't help but awaken. He charged at the Busoma, stabbing it and screaming. Sayaka didn't recognize the person in front of her. Despite being cut in two, the Busoma survived, threw a smoke bomb, and fled. No one pursued. Ikijo now solely focused on killing Guy. Of course, Guy was no match for him. After being knocked down, Guy regained consciousness, unaware of what had happened. Ikijo was not about to let him off, but he was interrupted by Kaitsu climbing on him, sniffing around. This eccentric behavior unnerved Ikijo. Despite his desire, Ikijo couldn't kill the old man, as only he knew where to find Guy. They agreed to keep a meter's distance before Ikijo was forced to lie down. In the pouring rain, Kaijizu met with Ammon. After hearing the story, Ammon reluctantly talked about Guy's deceased mother. Shiryu was stuck in her womb and left Guy alone when she passed away. When Guy woke up, his wounds were healed, but he had no memory. Sayaka tried to comfort him but was pushed away. Guy always returned home despite fleeing, knowing that darkness followed him everywhere, so he could only fulfill his mission to destroy the world and then break free from the darkness. Sayaka refused to accept the truth and tried to console him, but their perspectives were too different. Guy, though grateful, didn't see Ammon as his biological father, unaware of the deep affection Ammon had for him. Only Ammon was among the few who knew the legend of Shiryu, a sword forged by dragons. During the Muromachi period, there was a temple worshipping dragon horn. A priest there stole it and opened it with his wife. The light from inside blinded them, and a dragon escaped and entered the woman's body. She suddenly became pregnant and gave birth to a half-human, half-dragon child. The heartless parents let the child drift down the river and were struck by lightning. The dragon child was adopted by a blacksmith and grew up in his family. He married the master's daughter, and they had a lovely child. However, the dragon boy's reputation reached the shogun of the time. He ordered the boy to forge an unparalleled sword and present it to the shogun himself. Reluctantly obeying, the dragon boy was forced to remove his mask, revealing his face. As a result, his wife and child were killed. But no blade could cut him. In the end, they exiled him to the sea, left to survive on his own. When the dragon boy returned to his old home, memories of his family flooded back. Enraged, he resolved to forge two unmatched swords. The weaker one ended his own life. The other was meant to behead the shogun. Afterward, both Shiryu's swords disappeared. Legends say their shadows can be seen by someone special and wield power over life and death. This also explains why Shiryu is so filled with murderous intent. Ikijo was so moved by the story that he cried tears, even having a runny nose from crying too much. But he couldn't let Guy go. At dawn, he waited for Guy's return. This time, Ikijo extended his hand to Guy, inviting him to another world, Shashidai. Guy, puzzled, looked to his master. The decision was his alone to make. Reluctantly, Sayaka could do nothing but chase after the car, calling out to him. The other half of Shiryu, sensing its counterpart's movement, couldn't stay still. Once in Ikijo's car, Guy realized its terrifying nature. They arrived at a house full of flowers. Ikijo was taken aback by the person who opened the door. It was his long-lost love, Kei, who had been waiting for him for 16 years, tending to her garden. Ikijo thought Kei might have married during his hibernation, but she remembered nothing, thinking they had just watched a movie the previous day. When Kei stepped outside, Ikijo pulled Guy aside. He told Guy that eventually they would become Busoma, and to prevent this, they needed to hibernate. Ikijo had just woken up after 16 years. Ikijo and Kei had been friends since high school, with Kei being just a year younger than him. For Ikijo, time stood still during his hibernation, so he always looked like his 100-year-old self. Kei, however, didn't question it, and accepted the reality, fooling herself into believing they were a normal couple. That's why Ikijo wanted to make it up to her. Meanwhile, Guy, having been sent away, wandered to a crowded fighting arena. On stage, two opponents greeted the audience before sitting down at gaming consoles. It was just a virtual fight on screen. In contrast to the cheering crowd, Ikijo was immersed in his love for Kei. Reminiscing about old times, Kei suddenly experienced pain. She could no longer paint her toenails herself. She recounted memories they shared, once a couple that many envied. They had left their mark at every place they visited. Kei wished to go to the lake where Ikijo once picked up a hat for her. While retrieving the hat, Kei received a call from the hospital reminding her to return for her stroke treatment. She was unlikely to survive another episode. Ikijo silently went upstairs upon hearing this, and was shocked to find the mirror in the room covered. To Kei, everything still seemed like an illusion. Regarding the earlier battle, the victorious girl became arrogant, believing no one could beat her. Unexpectedly, her opponent approached her in the restroom, thanking Midoriko for saving his life. His optimism was sparked by her smile. But Midoriko didn't want to hear it, and shattered his illusions before arrogantly walking away. Everything still felt dull to Midoriko. When she encountered the boy again, she couldn't hold back and repeatedly hit him with her bag. Enraged, he snapped and attacked her. The fire sword, sensing a perfect new host, immediately flew towards her. Seduced by its whispers, Midoriko didn't hesitate to grab the sword and fatally strike the enraged boy. Back at the beautiful river, Kei and Ikijo playfully enjoyed their time together, reminiscent of old days, but pain struck again. Kei, seeing her reflection in the river, became melancholic. Midoriko, after acquiring the sword, began to wreak havoc around her. Guy, rushing in, also gets knocked down. He merges with his sword and engages in a fight with Midoriko. However, as a gamer, he's more agile than the average person. After returning home, Kei asks Ikijo to open the wardrobe. Inside is the wedding dress she has longed for. Wearing it, Kei feels immensely happy. Yet, at this moment, a wave of pain hits her. Lying on the bed, Kei admits that she always considered Ikijo an illusion. Despite this, her love for him is deep. He kisses her lips, bidding a final farewell. Ikijo then returns to his work. Now, Guy is left alone to deal with Midoriko's madness. Fortunately, Ikijo arrives just in time. The girl can only run away. Ikijo can't follow, but leads Guy away from this sorrowful city. On the vast sea, a plump woman lies enjoying her cocktail. Just after a sip, she calls Billy over for a scolding. He gets splashed with water and has to serve Yasuko's greasy figure. Both are united in their quest for treasure. Once obtained, Billy plans to buy a house for his parents. However, Yasuko, having not been active for a while, suddenly craves fresh, young blood. When Billy thinks his end is near, a bald man emerges from the water, claiming to have found Throla's treasure. Everyone on the yacht gathers. Yasuko opens it to find only bottles of liquor. There are many shipwrecks around, so perhaps it's from one of those unfortunate vessels. Everyone's ready to have fun, But Yasuko gets furious. She hired them for treasure, not to drink. Back on land, in a renowned hair salon, this handsome long-haired stylist is the desire of girls every night. Just by touching a girl's hair, he can tell everything about her. Although scolded, the girl is thrilled. After the makeover, she leaves with gorgeous hair. At night, the treasure hunt hasn't progressed. Everyone on the yacht gathers to talk. Each has their own reason for seeking Frola's treasure. The old professor accompanying them wishes to see Galen's hammer, a legendary weapon owned by the pirate Throla. Many years ago, tournaments were often held under the king's observation. Many sacrificed their lives in these battles. Over time, it was rumored that the victor always carried Galen's sword. One day, a knight came to Galen, wishing to win. Instead of collaborating, he killed Galen to stop the forging of any more weapons. Galen's son, left in anguish, cradled his father's body and wept for 3 days and nights. When his tears ceased, he heard a strange sound. It came from the hammer Galen used for weapon forging, imbued with extraordinary power. The son heeded the hammer's call, entered the tournament, and annihilated the knights. He won that day by shattering all the opposing swords, but the king, fearing the hammer's power, killed Galen's son. The boy coughed up blood and died. The hammer, tainted with poison, then belonged to the king. However, not long after, the kingdom was destroyed amid rumors that the king had been controlled by the hammer. Yasuko, hearing this, laughed out loud, only caring for the pile of gold before her. Contrary to her idle nature is Issei. He uses his fame to become wealthy. Issei's ideal woman needs only to have hair. He is seeking the one with the most beautiful hair in the world, only to kill her later. It sounds like a jest, but Issei is serious about this. Years ago, Issei witnessed the death of Sani right before his eyes. While wondering who was responsible, he became fixated on a woman with long hair, an unforgivable offender in his eyes. Later on the yacht, there's a stir. They've actually found Frola's treasure. Overwhelmed with joy, Yasuko goes mad. She hugs Billy, laughing in delight. Amid their celebration, they discover Dick has disappeared. Yasuko takes up the search, only to find Dick has died an unexplained death. Meanwhile, Issei's story also progresses. That day, he found the woman with the golden hair he had been searching for. He calmly cuts her hair as if nothing has happened. Unexpectedly, the woman begins to tell him about a legendary sword he's about to receive, containing a snow spirit inside. Two country boys, both in love with the white snow spirit, fought for her affection. The loser, reaching out to the snow spirit, whispered his last wish, "When I die, hold me in your arms." Fulfilling the man's desire, for the first time, the spirit set foot on the earth. In that moment, he broke his own rib and stabbed her heart. The rib that took the life of the snow spirit transformed into a bloodthirsty sword. As the story concludes, Issei finishes styling the girl's hair. Panic has now engulfed everyone on the yacht. They frantically search for the mastermind behind Dick's death. Only the old professor is missing. The bald man spontaneously decides to search, and soon after, the professor's screams echo. Everyone immediately rushes out, leaving Yasuko alone. When she emerges, everyone is lifeless, including the captain. Suddenly, Yasuko is attacked from behind by the professor, who truly wants the treasure for himself. However, the professor quickly meets his end. Billy saves Yasuko, earning her immense gratitude. Yet he too is selfish, and wants the treasure for himself. After a struggle, Yasuko is pushed into the sea, but luckily finds Galen's legendary hammer. The girl, her hair done, leaves, aware that Issei is watching her. He just wants to ask why she killed his sister. But the blonde kills without reason. Issei, unable to bear it, pulls the trigger. However, she doesn't die, but instead pulls out a sword from within her body. It is the sword imbued with the power of the snow spirit. Issei, merged with the sword, can only scream in agony. Hours later, Billy realizes another boat is drifting nearby. Just as he thinks he's about to be rescued, Yasuko emerges from the sea with Galen's hammer. Days later, the cursed duo, Issei and Yasuko, meet. In reality, there are many weapons beyond human comprehension. Shashidai now targets Kanata, the offspring of a human father and a spirit mother, born with knowledge and strength far surpassing humans. At 18, Kanata was given the halberd by his mother. The sword will unleash its true potential when used to uphold justice. But if used for evil, the wielder will face disaster. Kanata went to the battlefield, keeping his mother's words in heart, and to protect his village, he vanquished 100 enemies, becoming a hero. Upon returning, Kanata discovered that his beloved Sarah had married a young doctor in his absence. In a fit of rage, Kanata killed them both with his sword. From then on, Kanata turned into a demon, slaughtering the villagers and even his own parents, eventually dying in a massacre. The Lost Halberd is now the mission for Mickey and Marcus. Their target is the real estate conglomerate, Sekiya. Shoshidai received information that the director had acquired a weapon from a wealthy owner. Mina also joined the mission to infiltrate Sekiya's information network. Meanwhile, Akijo still mourns his late lover Kei. Her words echo in his mind. Guy has hardly eaten anything since joining Akijo, single-mindedly wanting to return to where he belongs. Guy is indifferent to how long he must hibernate, but no one knows when he will awaken. Perhaps by then, the world will have changed. The people Guy once knew may have returned to the earth. Mickey meets Mina and shares a passionate kiss. Marcus can only silently watch their affectionate moment. They aren't allowed romantic relationships within the headquarters, so it's a secret. Thanks to Mina's talent, they reached the highest floor of the headquarters without difficulty. Marcus comes up with a bold idea. Thanks to his Azoth sword, they are enveloped in darkness. They quickly enter the ventilation ducts from the restroom. Marcus, from a wealthy background, can hardly bear the stench, almost vomiting. Fortunately, they reach the bottom in time. Though they manage to open the safe, the sword is secured with a double-layered security system. Unaware, Marcus gets caught in it and triggers the alarm. Poison gas starts to release, and the ventilation shuts down. Mina desperately looks for something to help them. Meanwhile, Marcus tries to use his power, but the gas affects people like them. Just then, the director arrives. Mina lies about a medication check and leaves. However, the director detects her lie. In reality, he has been using the halberd for himself. Hearing Mina scream, Mickey couldn't remain calm. Thrown back, she could only retreat. Just then, Mickey appeared. All three clashed in combat. Mickey got injured protecting his lover, but he didn't let his opponent escape. Marcus took advantage of a blind spot and sliced the director in two. After his illumination, Halbert merged into Mickey's body. He screamed in pain, but no one could help. Later, the trio hid in a small alley. When everyone was worried about Mickey, he suddenly laughed and said it was fine. Mickey explained his wound had healed, so they didn't need to return to Shoshidai early. Marcus understood and left, giving the couple some privacy. Mina, still fearful of the two weapons' influence on her lover, outwardly acted normal, but inside, Halbert was stirring chaos in Mickey's mind. Ignoring it, he took his girlfriend to an amusement center. They tried every game there. By evening, Mickey wanted to set a Guinness record with his lover. In this tender moment, Halbert resurfaced. Mickey, losing control, wielded both weapons. Shoshidai, noticing the anomaly, contacted Marcus. Akijo also called, saying the break was over. Concerned for her boyfriend, Mina frantically searched for him, only to be knocked down by him. At this critical moment, Marcus arrived to protect her. He tried to summon Mickey's soul back. Akijo also came to help. Seconds later, Mickey completed the merger. Though not fully transformed into a Busoma, his strength was immense. This battle also agitated Shiryu within Guy. The two strongest members of Shoshidai fought. Akijo, despite his confidence, was knocked down. Guy had to use his power. Before the immense energy released, Akijo ran to shield Guy. Mina struggled to awaken her boyfriend. Busoma started tormenting itself. As it fought Mickey's control, Guy broke the armor with a strike. Mickey returned to his normal state, falling into his lover's arms. He was then taken back to Shoshidai for examination. Mickey's current condition was such that even hibernation was ineffective. They needed to retrieve both weapons as soon as possible. However, no one told Mina about this. She was relieved Mickey was safe. Contrarily, Mickey felt guilty for endangering his lover. Before hibernating, Mickey confessed to Mina that he just wanted to be normal, have children, and live happily. Then, Mickey proposed to Mina. Regrettably, he never anticipated transforming into a Busoma before he could fully hibernate. Mina silently witnessed this heartbreaking process. Turning back to Guy, the remaining Shiryu's sword was crying, searching for its companion. The wealthy family that owned it didn't know what to do. Despite their riches, they were powerless against the sword. The young master of the family, besides caring for the sword, was also involved in charitable activities. He was deeply concerned about abandoned children, and even the elderly in nursing homes. However, both the orphanage and the nursing home were built under one roof, where Sayaka and her father lived. Sayaka still longed for Guy, blaming her father for Guy's dangerous predicament. She saw him as a person, not just a sword. But Mr. Ammon understood. Guy was essentially the sword's sheath, containing Shiryu's humanity. The choice between good and evil rested on Guy. As Sayaka gazed at the moon, reminiscing about Guy, he did the same. She remembered how as a child, when searching for Guy, they encountered a wolf. Guy had protected her despite being gravely injured. They held hands on their way home, a memory that still moved Sayaka deeply. While gazing at the moon, Guy was interrupted by Akijo, who was still in pain from his wounds. Guy couldn't understand why this man was protecting him. Akijo's remark about Guy being weak surprised him. He asked Guy if he had someone special in his heart, hinting at Sayaka. But Guy was too young to understand. In reality, he felt like living just for himself, not needing to worry about others. This was Guy's weakness. If he couldn't protect those he loved, it meant he couldn't protect himself either. Returning to the young master of Shiryu, he brought 2 investors to the land to decide where to build. They argued intensely. While brainstorming, he could only draw pictures. At that moment, Shin had a brilliant idea to combine the 2 projects. It sounded impractical, but made perfect sense. The dispute was resolved, and Shin proved his ability. Meanwhile, the young mistress of the house was still attending school. She decided not to think about Guy anymore and actively socialized with her friends. Due to Soin's death, Kazumo approached Kaitsu, requesting a cremation for him. They realized they had underestimated the Busoma. Now that creature had also gone into hiding. The era of Chrysalis was approaching. To protect everyone, Gabai should join forces with Shashidai. However, they were a group that did not use weapons. Instead, they trusted in the divine. Gabai still believed that eventually the weapon would turn her into a Busoma. But Kaitsu's hope still lay with Guy. Currently he was being held by Akijo, forced to cook for him. Guy couldn't stand the sedentary lifestyle. The recent battle made him ponder about Shashidai. It seemed like a place that prevented them from becoming Busoma. Guy didn't understand why they clung to their humanity so desperately. Many years ago, when Akijo was still human, he was ambushed and nearly killed. At that critical moment, a divine bracelet appeared. Once he wore it, Akijo's power surged, annihilating the enemy. When he was about to harm his allies, a photo of him with K fell out, reminding him of his humanity. He hoped Guy wouldn't be consumed by the weapon. At that time, Sayaka was having a great time with her friends. Upon returning home, she accidentally bumped into Shin, who was rallying people to sign a petition. She immediately agreed to help. Just then, she encountered some hooligans. Shin tried to help, but was punched. Despite her pleas, he was knocked unconscious. Sayaka patiently waited for him to wake up. The thugs, unsatisfied, went looking for other victims, but unluckily ran into Midoriko. She killed them and quickly approached Sayaka's location. Driven by a bloodthirsty frenzy, Midoriko was out of control. Fortunately, Guy appeared in time. Shin also realized that Shiryu was on the arm of this young man. Meanwhile, Akijo, searching for Guy, ran into Miura. He was saddened to see his old friend in such a state, but Miura left, leaving Akijo in pain. When Midoriko attacked, Guy merged with Shiryu to fight her. For the first time, he injured Midoriko. Realizing she shouldn't stay, she fled once again. Seeing Guy again filled Sayaka with both sadness and heartache. She wished for Guy to return to her, but he pushed her away. This event led Sayaka to revert to her former state. This time, however, Shin appeared right in her classroom. As for Shashidai, Mina became an experiment in Marcus's evolutionary process. After completing her transformation, Mina was reborn as Aya, resembling Marcus's ideal type. Aya is now Marcus's supervisor. When he woke up again, he immediately went to the control room, where Aya casually walked in to greet him. Her resemblance to his former girlfriend startled him. As expected, Marcus quickly fell for this girl's charm. Aya began questioning Marcus, lying that Mickey was hibernating peacefully. Though somewhat comforted, Marcus was still consumed by fear, worried he might turn into a Busoma at any moment. Aya seized the opportunity to embrace Marcus. This moment reminded him of Erica. Embarrassed, Marcus withdrew from her arms. All this was carefully calculated by Shashidai. They were also closely monitoring Akijo's every move. Over the next few days, they grew closer. Akijo shared a lot about the existence of Chrysalis and Busoma. For him, Shoshidai was their salvation. However, Guy still didn't fully trust it. Currently, Shin was using his talents to charm the class. Soon, he became popular for his looks and wealth, which made the other boys in the class jealous. When Shin was alone, they confronted him. They even hurled abusive words and extorted money from Shin. Seeing this, Sayaka stepped in to help and loudly called for the teacher, attracting other students' attention. After the bullies left, Sayaka returned Shin's wallet. The two became closer. Shin couldn't help but ask about Guy. Sayaka fell silent upon hearing his name. Upon returning, Ikijo was reprimanded by Kyoka, but her focus quickly shifted to Guy's arm. Kyoka urged Ikijo to go into hibernation, but this time he refused. If he continued like this, he would turn into a Busoma, but Ikijo still had things to do. He knew Kyoka was Miura's daughter, now grown up and continuing her father's work. Ikijo wanted to redeem Miura's soul and fulfill his daughter Kyoka's wish. However, Kyoka couldn't decide on this matter. Since her mother's death, her father was her only support. When Kyoka went to the thieves to retrieve the weapon, she was met with refusal. They spoke disdainfully of Miura, tarnishing the history of Shoshida. Ikijo took Guy to see the weapons. Guy's hand trembled, but he managed to control himself. Only Chrysalis could defeat Busoma, but the longer it was bonded, the more transformation Guy underwent. Ikijo couldn't comprehend Guy's thoughts at that moment. When they went outside, they met Marcus, who greeted Guy warmly before being quickly called away by Aya. In the evening, Sayaka went out again with her friends, unexpectedly finding Shin at the drawing club, delighting the girls. Shin didn't draw objects but sketched Sayaka instead. This peaceful life contrasted starkly with those who knew about the legendary weapons. Miura continued his killing spree, unfazed by advanced weaponry. These were Busoma fighting weapons discovered by the headquarters. Kyoka stared at the screen, speechless. Her father used to be a very gentle person, but now Miura's face was only filled with murderous intent. Kyoka reluctantly entrusted her father to Ikijo on the condition that Guy would come along. The last time Kyoka saw her father, she asked if Miura would return. He had promised to come back, but at the headquarters, Kyoka could only see her father through a screen. Miura destroyed all the strongest weapons in an instant. Seconds later, Ikijo and Guy arrived at the battlefield. They reminisced about old times, but Miura remembered nothing. They might as well be toasting in the underworld. Guy looked at the man before him, recalling their conversation in the car. Ikijo's time was running out. He wanted Guy to kill him when he turned into a Busoma. This was their promise. Ikijo was relieved, allowing himself to unleash his power. He didn't know that Miura had darkness in his heart. His aim was to free his old friend, but the power of the demon sword was overwhelming. This battle reminded Ikijo of the past. Miura had always trained with the sword to become stronger. Ikijo and Miura had promised each other that if one lost themselves, the other would help with all their might. The two plunged into a fierce battle. After his club activities, Shin rushed to chat with Sayaka, eager to give her the painting he drew that afternoon. However, Sayaka just thanked him and left. The demon within Miura showcased its power, forcing Ikijo to evade repeatedly. Ikijo tied Miura up, intending to make him explode, but a sudden surge of pain hit, and Miura broke free, countering the attack. Ikijo was hurled near Guy. Then, Miura transformed into the complete embodiment of the sword, wanting Ikijo to become a Busoma like himself. But Guy wasn't going to let his teammate fight alone. He tried to hold back Miura to give Ikijo some time. When Ikijo could barely hold on, he came from behind to assist. Guy took this chance to strike the demon sword in the stomach. After that, Ikijo successfully created his own energy ring. As Guy was about to finish the battle, he was stopped by another, taller Busoma. Even Shashidai was terrified upon seeing him, a level above ordinary Busoma. Kazumo immediately returned to inform Himiko about Soin's death. They now needed to become even stronger. Sayaka returned home and looked at Shin's painting. Ever since Guy left, she had been noticeably sad. Sayaka was unaware of the danger Guy was currently facing. Grimm's, the origin of the Busoma, stood before them. This was Ikijo's first encounter with him. Despite wanting to, he no longer had the strength to run. Guy stood still, unwilling to leave. He listened silently to every word Grimm spoke. The murderous aura caused Guy to lose control. After school, Shin hurried to a party, where he eloquently spoke about his vision and goals for a better world, wishing for humanity to eliminate violence. He argued that if humans didn't abandon violence, the world would never be peaceful. Violence is not the inherent nature of humanity. The more violence there is, the more the world suffers. Peace can only be established through non-violence. But that's not all. To protect Guy, Ikijo attacked Grimm's, but he was utterly drained. Grimm's easily subdued him. Next, Guy appeared, bringing joy to Grimm's. The battle only ended when both were reborn. Guy and Ikijo were defeated and cast away, but not forgiven. Standing up, Guy's mind was filled with thoughts of slaughter, and the photo with Sayaka cracked. To prevent Guy from becoming a Busoma, Ikijo used his last bit of strength. But he couldn't watch over Guy until the end. Guy, transforming into a Busoma, immediately pierced Ikijo. Ikijo bid farewell and also became a Busoma. Realizing Ikijo, Guy awakened and returned to his original state. This was what Grimm's had longed for. Ikijo, now a Busoma, fiercely attacked Grimm's. The collision of the two shook the city. By dawn, only Guy remained alive. Kyoka had to temporarily forget her father to bring Guy back. Meanwhile, Sayaka prayed for Guy's safety. The sword had merged with Guy, becoming one with his body. When Guy awoke, his first question was about Ikijo. Guy had promised to destroy him if Ikijo became a Busoma. But Shashirai couldn't let Guy leave at that moment. His blood level indicated he was on the verge of becoming a Busoma. Left with no choice, Kyoka put Guy into an induced coma and placed him in cryogenic sleep. Unbeknownst to all, what Guy received was eternal hibernation. Unaware of what had happened, Sayaka continued to speak of Guy and sought comfort from Shin. Guy's scent was very similar to the sword at Shin's house. She hoped to somehow meet Guy again. Currently, Ikijo's Busoma form had taken control, its energy potent enough to destroy a city. Guy, awakened from his cryogenic sleep, escaped. This was the action taken by the leaders of Shashirai, who knew only Guy could defeat Ikijo. Soon, the two faced each other. Ikijo, in agony, screamed and transformed into a Busoma. His incredible power overwhelmed Guy, who fell onto a pile of scrap metal, unable to move. A voice echoed in Guy's head. He struggled to control himself to avoid transforming. This time, Guy managed to block the Busoma's attack. He yelled Ikijo's name, then fully transformed. When Shashirai located Guy, they found both had become Busoma. The two weapons relentlessly attacked each other, causing massive buildings to collapse. Even as Guy lay on the ground, Ikijo continued his assault. Himiko had never seen a battle like this, sensing the sorrow in both weapons. They fought on, and Guy succeeded in impaling Ikijo. In Guy's subconscious, Ikiro apologized and left. Guy, not knowing what to do, could only embrace Ikijo and cry. As Ikijo disappeared from Guy's mind, he also vanished from the armor. Afterwards, Guy returned to his old home with Sayaka. Everyone was glad to see him back. Sayaka happily asked if Guy wouldn't leave again, but he didn't know why he was there. Seeing his reflection in the water drove him to despair, hiding in a cave. Sayaka found and comforted him. Guy feared himself and the darkness, the very things he had to fight. Sayaka moved to embrace Guy, but he suddenly transformed into a Busoma and pierced her. Fortunately, it was just his illusion. The next morning, Guy visited his mother's grave, no longer harboring resentment towards the woman who had protected him. Sayaka had prayed for her to always be by his side. Returning home, Guy lost control for a moment. He turned to swordsmithing to forget the murderous intent in his heart. No one dared disturb him. After a day, he had forged a sharp knife. Guy told Sayaka about Ikijo and gave her the small sword for self-protection. Their bond grew stronger and a peaceful life resumed. However, that night, Guy decided to leave without a word. Looking at the item Ikijo left behind, he sat down, drew the sword, and stabbed his own hand, enduring the pain to extract Shiryu from his body. After completing this, he jumped from the building to free himself. Sayaka, worried, went looking for him and witnessed this tragic scene, her scream echoing through the city. As night fell, Marcus parachuted from a helicopter. He used Azoth to immobilize the enemies. Shashirai's target this time was Pyramid. After locating the sword, Marcus put everyone to sleep. However, Pyramid had merged with the team captain. Marcus had no choice but to kill him and retrieve the Pyramid. Marcus returned without a single wound. However, he didn't want to hibernate immediately. Exhausted from overwork, Marcus yearned for a few days of rest. He wished to spend time with Aya, his beloved. His love for Aya had brought significant changes in him. Yet, danger still loomed ahead. Far away, in a hospital, children were waiting for treatment, unaware of when they could leave. Shoko promised to feast once discharged, but Ri wore a look of sadness. She longed to be with her brother as soon as possible. This time, Ri was taken for a medical checkup first. She had to follow the doctor's instructions to get discharged soon. But the injections became more frequent, each one making Ri feel like she was dying and coming back to life. Not far from there were Marcus and Aya, spending time on a vast beach. Marcus, wishing to be with Aya, decided to work permanently for Shashirai. He hoped to marry Aya right then, not after becoming something else, but at that very moment. Aya joyfully agreed. She kissed him and proposed trying a kiss as long as a Guinness World Record. This left Marcus feeling tentative. His health had been exceptionally good recently. Even the doctor at Shashirai said Marcus wouldn't turn into a Busoma. He whimsically mentioned that the Alma of Azoth was somewhere else. This sword was special, containing the sealed demon Beelzebub by a witch. They were facing a demon, not just a human. The calm sea made Marcus happy. Mentioning Migi reminded him of what Mina had said before. Aya lied that the person had moved to South Korea. She quickly went inside to rest. Her profile strikingly resembled Mina, causing Marcus a splitting headache. Sayaka continued going to school as usual. However, now she couldn't speak. She could only open her mouth and rely on Shin to translate. She didn't want people to over-concern themselves with her because of her inability to speak. Sayaka accidentally splashed with water left. It had been 3 months since Guy's death, and she became quiet and speechless. Although Shin tried to be cheerful, he knew this girl was sadder than anyone else. Sayaka, of course, shared her thoughts about marriage with Kyoka. After their marriage, Marcus would be able to enter hibernation. Then Aya would transform into someone else to take over a new chrysalis. However, Marcus discovered that Mina was not in South Korea. He commanded Beelzebub to search for this woman. It was then he uncovered an earth-shattering secret. Aya couldn't bear the burden of their pretend love anymore. Kyoka tried to comfort her, but inadvertently revealed Mickey's death, executed by Shashirai, something Marcus never anticipated. Grief turned into despair, followed by a bloodlust. Shin, as always, stayed close to Sayaka to alleviate her sadness. When Aya returned to her room, she unexpectedly found Marcus. He immediately exposed her lies. Stunned by the betrayal, Aya tried to explain. Her previous deception aside, she had genuinely fallen in love with Marcus. But as she kissed Marcus, she was unexpectedly stabbed to death. Marcus transformed into a Busoma within Shashirai, immune to gunfire. Betrayed by all, his anger was justified. When Sayaka used red paint, memories of blood pools flooded back. Kyoka had no choice but to liberate the other chrysalises to pursue him. Fleeing, Sayaka found a desolate place to cry. Shin, a silent witness to all, could only pray to Shiryu. The next morning he greeted Sayaka as if nothing had happened, her face filling him with sorrow. Shin offered help, only to be rejected. He feared something worse might happen. After transforming into a Busoma, Marcus broke the gates and escaped. Kyoka ordered the remaining chrysalises to hunt him down. Issei joined in, his usual concern for his daughter's hair contrasting Kyoka's indifference. In his first battle, Issei quickly became the topic of conversation among the others. They joined Shashirai to avoid becoming monsters. However, Issei had a different reason, repeatedly harassed by a madwoman, not spared even at motels. This woman was 1,000 times more terrifying than any other Busoma. Issei couldn't admit he joined Shashirai to protect his virginity. Sayaka, unable to speak, faced numerous challenges, but Shin was always there to help. She didn't know what else to do but thank her kind friend. However, this only made Shin feel more awkward. Today was indeed a beautiful day. Shin wanted to invite Sayaka out with him. They wandered through all the games inside the shopping center. Afterwards, they sat down to eat and talk. Shin had always wanted to do this, just like normal people. Even Sayaka seemed happier. Back at the old hospital, Ri was still haunted by her previous nightmare. She wanted to leave as soon as possible, and even Shoko seemed saddened by this. Apart from one day a month, they were not allowed to leave. Only Sayori seemed willing to obediently stay. After serious contemplation, she decided to help her two friends escape. Even Sayori wanted to enjoy normal activities. They reached the door but couldn't open it. Everything here was secure. After having their fill of fun, Sayaka and Shin left. But they stopped right where Guy had died. Sayaka relived those horrific memories once again. Before meeting Marcus, the chrysalises accidentally bumped into the fat lady. Issei was the last to leave, fleeing as soon as he saw her. However, Galen was a brutal weapon. As the two sides fought, Marcus appeared. He laughed sinisterly and quickly killed both chrysalises. Issei was so frightened he could only run back, wetting his pants. Evil spirits were everywhere. Himiko, sensing this, silently left the shrine. Despite trying all the doors, the three children couldn't find a way out. They had to go to a dark place and try to open the iron door. When it opened, they were met with a suffocating cement wall. The children, still not understanding what was happening, were knocked out by gas. After coming to her senses, Sayaka's face fell back into sadness. Shin tried to talk and empathize with his friend. He too was a person struggling to survive. His past memories were always a haunting presence. It was the Grimms who had killed his mother and sister. Shin's sisters still had to be hospitalized. Shin, having miraculously escaped, could not forgive himself. He had to strive to find light before being swallowed by darkness. That force was still trying to pull Shin down. These people were no different from what Guy had said. Shin began to panic, just like Guy that time. Terrified, Sayaka suddenly found her voice. She promised to protect him, and they shared a kiss under the melancholy sunset. A few days later, Shin visited his sister, who turned out to be Ri. He was unaware that his sister was being held at this place, and he had great trust in the doctor. When Himiko went outside, a Busoma killed Soin and tried to kill her, but Himiko had anticipated this. The Busoma retreated in fear into the shadows. Ri, having lost her memory, only remembered eating and being examined. Shin, thinking his sister was okay, tried to reassure her. Ri was sad because she couldn't go outside and wanted to leave as soon as possible to play with her brother. This time, the doctor allowed her to go catch stuffed animals. When she met her brother, Ri had a fun time, but she didn't forget her friends Shoko and Sayori. Then, the doctor led her somewhere. When Ri asked where they were going, the doctor turned around, activated a device on Ri's wrist, and she fainted. Shashidai became busier because of Marcus's situation. Kyoko wanted to send more chrysalises, but she was completely ignored. Frustrated, she returned to her room to drink and continued to observe. Even Kyoka didn't know why she was there. Looking at her father's broken mirror, she couldn't help but remember Miura's image, now completely different. She shook off her shock and went to the observation room. Marcus was in the park harming girls. His bizarre behavior caused panic. It seemed Marcus hadn't fully turned into a Busoma. A fragment of his human memory was still there. Despite wanting to send more chrysalises, Kyoka had no authority. She could only grit her teeth and watch. Shin and Sayaka were also in a park somewhere. Lately, they had been going out together like a couple. Even though their conversation was natural, Shin had spent the entire night thinking. Every time he remembered their kiss, he would bump his head against a tree trunk. When Ri woke up, she sadly told the doctor she didn't want to return to the hospital. She disliked pain and suffering. That's why this time Ri ran away. Meanwhile, her brother, oblivious, was happily with his girlfriend. At that moment, Shin saw Ri running past. In a panic, Shin chased after his sister, leaving Sayaka alone. Ri, running through the bushes, accidentally bumped into Marcus. Upon his proposal of marriage, she quickly agreed. The naive child unwittingly fell into the hands of a dangerous man. When Shin arrived, the girl was already gone. Kiyomi, after encountering the Busoma, tracked it to its hideout. The two faced each other, and with a single lethal move, Kiyomi completely defeated her opponent. Then she took the weapon the Busoma left behind and inserted it into herself. Returning to Ri, Marcus led her to a church to request a wedding ceremony. Hearing his earnest plea, the priest could only agree. Under the enchanting evening light, Marcus smiled, having fulfilled his wish. But Ri looked around bewilderedly, thinking that agreeing would reunite her with her brother. However, life is not a dream. Angered, Marcus transformed into a Busoma and killed the priest, then proceeded towards the girl to continue the ceremony. Fortunately, Shin arrived just in time. He took a blow for his sister, then tried to protect Ri. But this time, Shin couldn't do anything else. In his anguish, a bloodied man appeared with the Shiryu sword. Behind him was the embodiment of Shiryu, wanting Shin to become its sheath. Accepting the truth, Shin took up Shiryu and gained immense power. He needed only one stroke to defeat Marcus. After the deed, Shin's strength was drained, and he fainted. However, what puzzled people was Ri's sinister smile. In a nearby alley, some mean students were bullying their classmate and extorting money from him. After being abused, the boy ran to the weapon museum to cry. It seemed the armor behind him was calling him. The boy turned around to see an eye protruding out. He was drawn to it without fear, even standing up. It turns out that Guy, after attempting suicide, was not dead. Himiko brought him back to the shrine for treatment. During his time there, Guy diligently meditated. To replace his lost arm, Himiko had prepared a wooden arm for Guy. It was the right size, but it couldn't move. Despite this, Guy didn't offer a single word of thanks. Kazumo, infuriated, remembered the incident from that day. If it wasn't for Himiko's request, Kazumo wouldn't have wanted to save this ungrateful person. But Guy didn't ask to be saved either. Himiko couldn't let Guy die because she saw the demon still alive inside him. She didn't know what he was thinking, but self-harm wouldn't save Guy's soul. Now he could only live as though he were dead, for the demon within him to completely disappear. As they were talking, a disciple came in to announce the start of a competition between the students. Himiko and Kazumo had to leave, but invited Guy to watch. The students here took turns attacking each other, but the result was always a draw. This method was called the Mind Fist of No Abode. Himiko was the only exceptional practitioner in 300 years. At the age of 9, she was entrusted with a pendant by her father, signifying the right to lead the family. When Himiko entered the arena, everyone tensed up. As soon as they moved, Himiko had already teleported behind them. The power she held was 21 types of primal energy from the Busomas she had defeated. Hard to believe, but everyone had seen it with their own eyes. She was the sheath for all kinds of weapons, something that could pacify them. After 2 attempts, Himiko took away the primal energy of the other 2. The outcome was clear. Himiko turned to Guy, indicating she wanted him to train here. At night, they took Guy to the 7 layers of Hellfire, where his karmic obstacles would be tested. The candles lit themselves. Guy simply had to step out of the circle to win. But every time he neared the flame, the people he had killed appeared. Thus, the flames burned more intensely. Their faces reminded Guy of the killings, and he screamed in agony, causing the fire to blaze fiercely. Himiko had to jump in to intervene, removing his primal energy and absorbing it. This caused Guy to faint immediately. When they brought him back to his room, Kazumo wanted to eliminate Guy as soon as possible. If Guy stayed, disaster would surely follow. But Himiko disagreed. Guy was someone they needed to save. After all, this place wasn't just for training, but also for saving lives. Returning to the bullied boy, this time he ran determinedly to the armor. Kiromaru's prayer had been realized. Kiromaru, undeterred by the sharp spikes inside the armor, stepped in. He then transformed into the armor and chased away the bullies to their embarrassment. Meanwhile, Guy awoke. He was the first to create such a massive flame. He chose to hate himself rather than the world. Born as his mother committed suicide and left behind a sword, Guy's destiny had been tied to it. Seeing his own desire for violence, he chose to abandon it. Now he needed to change. Guy wished to rid himself of his mind like Himiko, who was called the Tomb of Weapon. Himiko held Guy's vital energy in admiration. If he could tame his rage, Guy could transform it into light droplets that bloom flowers. Seeing them, Guy realized this girl was not as cold as she claimed. He felt a strong warmth from her. Thus, Himiko should not consider herself a tomb of weapons. After leaving Guy, Himiko faced Kazumo, who feared his master would fall for the boy and lose control over the weapons. But Himiko was still fine. Meanwhile, Kiramaru, not knowing how to get out of the armor, was confronted by Midoriko. With the help of the Grimms, she had fully become a Busoma. Midoriko chased Kiramaru to the rooftop, but their fight was interrupted by Jeskos, the demon known for causing disturbances. Grimms knew this would happen but just watched. Even his two subordinates did not bother to help. Humanity was gradually dying, and the Busoma were vying for dominance. However, Busishin had yet to appear, representing the path to humanity's end, as if fated. Grimm's prophecy was not entirely accurate, nor could it be fully trusted. Mimiko used a fire phoenix to reach Kiramaru on the rooftop. She knew he needed salvation, and that Himiko could provide it. Midoriko seemed strong, but Jeskos ultimately defeated her, allowing Kiramaru to escape. In the shrine, Kazumo was intent on dealing with Guy himself, but Guy wouldn't leave without learning anything. He could only defend himself against Kazumo's attacks. When Kiramaru arrived, he stood up to protect this Busoma. The boy fainted and returned to human form. Himiko's fire phoenix also returned to its master. After the incident with Marcus, Shin was taken to Shashidai for treatment. Upon awakening, memories and a surge of murderous intent overwhelmed him. Kyoka, accompanied by the leader, visited him. She explained the recent events. Shin's father, the leader of the Matoba clan, had made significant financial contributions to Shashidai. He understood his father's emotions better than anyone. That time, when their family of 4 was happily together, a Busoma appeared and killed his revered wife. This memory became a dark spot in his father's heart. But only now did Shin learn about this. Feeling Shiryu within himself, he cried out for help. Like this, Shin feared he would become the monster he always hated. Therefore, his father requested Shashidai to use Maldikin on his son. It was still experimental, but the only way. If he turned into a Busoma, his father would lose his son forever. Shin accepted his father's decision, lying still, waiting for the substance to be removed from his body. However, unknown to them, Ri was the one to bear its burden, seemingly part of the doctor's plan. The next day at the church, Kiramaru had fully recovered. Kazumo couldn't understand why Himiko saved this Busoma. Although turned into a monster, he wasn't malevolent, but obediently followed Himiko's fire phoenix. Temporarily, she left Guy to take care of the boy. Gabai was busy with the increasing number of Busoma. Himiko knew Kazumo was worried for her, but she wasn't concerned. She would live her life as fate dictated. Once Kiramaru could walk again, he was allowed outside. He was so kind-hearted that even birds wanted to help him. However, Kiramaru inadvertently climbed the sacred tree, causing irritation among the students. They scolded him and were about to get physical. Fortunately, Guy arrived in time to prevent a disaster. He took Kiramaru to a quiet place and called for Himiko. Guy had seen Kiramaru restrain himself from becoming a Busoma and wanted to control Shiryu similarly. If he had to die, Guy chose to rest eternally within Himiko. Though his words were somewhat moving, the goddess wanted this young man to continue fighting. Sayaka, missing Shin, began to think of Guy. Seeing his daughter in such pain, her father didn't know how to console her. He only wanted to give Guy a life, but things had escalated. After the drug trial, Shin's Alma core completely vanished, meaning he returned to being normal. This gave Kyoka hope of saving her father. But no one knew the killing intent still deep within Shin's mind. He felt a strange calling and went to the weapon room, where he found Guy's prosthetic arm. Shin's eyes suddenly darkened. By the time everyone realized, he had silently stolen the arm and left. This led Kyoka to believe in the legend of the 2 swords. When she sent people to bring Shin back, his father appeared and ordered a halt to all Shashidai activities. At Himiko's shrine, Guy was lighting the lamps at dusk as usual. Unexpectedly, Shin appeared there, without clear reason. They went to a secluded place to talk about Shiryu. Shin also harbored the sword and understood it well. But not wanting to be bound by fate, Guy threw his prosthetic arm into the water. They returned home in silence. Shin, grateful for being saved before, wanted to thank Guy. While they were talking about Sayaka, a disturbance occurred at the shrine. Everyone fainted for an unknown reason. Jeskos came there to fight Kiramaru. Guy quickly grabbed the boy and told Shin to get down the mountain. Guy's hand was shot off. Seeing this, Kiromaru instantly turned into a Bosoma. However, he was no match for Jeska. The disciples who had fainted tried to get up to protect Kiromaru, but even Kazumo's shield was ineffective. Unable to bear the sight of these people being slaughtered, Guy angrily called for Shiryu to return to him. A ring of golden light engulfed him like a dragon, transforming him again into a bloodthirsty Busoma. Even Jeskas's attacks were futile against him. Guy charged like a rocket, cutting down the Busoma's color. After everything calmed down, Kazumo rebuked Guy, saying he shouldn't have saved him. If he had known Guy was a Busoma, he would have made him suffer. But when Himiko returned, Kazumo suddenly lost consciousness. Despite his severe injuries, he continued to grumble about Guy. Himiko alone understood that Guy was innocent. Kiromaru, not finding Guy at the temple, ran outside. As he approached, he noticed Guy's gaze had drastically changed. A curious passerby in a car stopped to watch the commotion, but suddenly, as if hypnotized, he flashed a sinister smile and stopped to take Guy with him. After the success of Prismafen, Shoshidai marked it as a significant advancement. It seemed only a matter of time before Miura would revert to normal. However, Shin continued to be haunted by his bloodlust. Pretending to be calm, he went to school as usual, nonchalantly talking about having seen Guy the day before. But Sayaka, having witnessed Guy's death, was eager to learn about his current whereabouts. It was now evident that Sayaka had always loved Guy, a realization that disappointed Shin, as she had kissed someone she did not truly love. This time, Shin chose to ignore the bullies. However, when they touched him, he violently subdued them, leaving them unable to get up. With the successful results from Prismafen, Kyoka dispatched 3 people to confront her father. However, the supreme leaders of Shoshidai disapproved. They saw Miura as a disgrace, deserving of harsh consequences. Unwilling to accept this, Kyoka went to the lab herself, brandishing a gun and threatening her colleagues to gain entry. Other chrysalises, though lacking Prismafen, were still sent to the battlefield. Among them, only Issei survived. Kyoka also arrived at the scene to fight. Unlike before, Issei displayed remarkable combat skills. He attacked the demon sword fervently, only to be violently thrown back, coughing up blood. Kyoka's gun, initially thought to fire regular bullets, was actually equipped with Prismafen. The demon sword was unexpectedly defeated with a single shot. Kyoka then proceeded to inject it with several more syringes. Back with Guy, the driver, now under his control, resembled a bloodthirsty demon. Guy's gaze swept across the city, causing immediate pandemonium. People's eyes turned blood red, filled with murderous intent, plunging the city into chaos. Memories of Miura's past life surfaced. He had a small family and a beautiful wife. Although merely an observer, the chrysalises all regarded Miura as a friend. Miura was powerless to save his wife's life. In those moments, holding his daughter in his arms, he yearned for the strength to protect what was left of his family. This desire led him to seek out the demon sword, which ultimately chose him as the most suitable host. Now awakened, Miura realized the girl before him was his daughter Kyoka. 16 years had passed since the sword had taken control of him. Gently, he told Kyoka that she looked just like her mother. But their brief happiness was interrupted by Shoshidai soldiers. They had been trying to control Miura all this time. He obediently went with them, but they didn't head to Shoshidai. Instead, they took father and daughter to a dump site, intending to eliminate both of them. In an effort to save Kyoka, Miura was shot. Ironically, the injury allowed the demon sword to take control once again. By the time Kyoka realized what was happening, it was too late. She was impaled by the sword, desperately calling out to her father as his figure grew distant. Unable to follow him any longer, Kyoka's life ebbed away. Now, Guy seemed like a completely different person, leaving a trail of death wherever he went. Even Kiromaru couldn't reach his soul. After attacking Kiromaru, Guy continued on his path. Ri returned to her hospital room, but her mood had drastically changed. Even Sayori's silly faces couldn't bring a smile to her face. Following the doctor's orders, Sayori also departed. Shen, Ri's brother, was striving to live a normal life. Everyone in class respected him for his knowledge, but only the bullies knew how frightening he could be. Ri, in contrast, remained childlike, eagerly waiting for her brother. Shoko, unsure of what to do, comforted her at her bedside. If Ri couldn't meet her brother, Shoko would be the loving brother she needed. The atmosphere in the hospital became lighter. Sayori, although allowed to go outside, just wandered around the park. She didn't hate the hospital. She just didn't want to experience pain. When she thought of leaving, her wristband was activated. She returned to the hospital, bringing butterflies back to her two friends. However, Sayori soon collapsed, her hands bearing unusual wounds. The doctor, wanting to keep the matter under wraps, lied about the situation. He initially pushed Shoko out of the room to meet her mother, but it wasn't a visiting day, and Shoko, not wanting to see the woman, forcefully rejected the doctor's attempt and sent him out. After diverting attention to Shoko, the doctor left. In reality, the woman was not Shoko's biological mother. Shoko had witnessed her real mother being killed by her. Taking advantage of her father's grief, this woman had inserted herself as the matriarch of the family. Sayori too understood this plight. She had been abused by her mother for pleasure before being admitted to the hospital. Unbeknownst to the three girls, they were merely experimental subjects for Shoshidai, intended to be transformed into Busoma as quickly as possible. Their selection criteria were a troubled family background and harbored resentment. The doctor immensely enjoyed his research, but it was a tragedy for these innocent children. After the doctor left, Midoriko appeared unexpectedly, murdering the female nurse and heading straight to the children's room. When Himiko and Kazumo descended the mountain, they found only devastation and ruins. The murderous aura of Shiryu had intensified. Shin followed Sayaka back to her house, apologizing for not considering her feelings the other day. In truth, Shin didn't expect Sayaka to reciprocate his feelings. However, Kuromaru appeared at that moment, recognizing Shin as Guy's friend and seeking his help. Hearing the name of her long-cherished love, Sayaka couldn't resist and hurried to meet him. Ri's abduction had now spiraled out of control, and they could only hope for Guy's assistance. They were shocked to discover that he was the perpetrator. When Sayaka saw him, she embraced Guy, but he was indifferent and pushed her away. Shin wasn't surprised. His current priority was rescuing his sister from that Busoma. Having lost his powers, Shin had to rely on Guy. Ri had been taken to an abandoned house near the sea. From the moment she lost consciousness until she woke up, Midoriko watched over her. Ri was merely bait to awaken her oblivious brother. But even Midoriko didn't expect the girl to be a monster. Guy and his companions had also arrived there. Shin wanted Sayaka to leave for her safety, but she refused to go. Even Guy, indifferent, headed straight to the site of the battle. However, Shin could no longer recognize Ri. When she saw her brother, she immediately fled. Left in the warehouse was only Midoriko, but Guy wasn't deterred and instantly transformed into a Busoma to fight. Sayaka tried to intervene, but ended up being stabbed. Guy had lost all his humanity. He cared only for the fight, nothing else. Seeing Sayaka weakening in his arms, Shin couldn't contain the hatred boiling inside him, and finally used a knife to kill Midoriko. After the incident, Guy, losing interest in the fight, left. Sayaka was taken to the hospital, her life narrowly saved. When her father arrived, the situation was already resolved. However, he was shocked to learn that Guy had stabbed his daughter. Ammon's face paled, reflecting on his action. He now believed that entrusting Shiryu to Guy was a mistake. Ri, who had disappeared the previous night, returned to the hospital. Her wounds healed on their own, but Ri was not surprised. Issei, after the battle with a demon sword, took a few days off to return to his passionate hobby. Despite a long period of hibernation, he hadn't forgotten how to care for hair. His hairstyling skills satisfied his customers. This was what Issei needed, not Shoshidai. While enjoying this perfect moment, Yasuko appeared. She had bought all the hair salons to find information about him. For Issei, this obsession was more terrifying than death itself. He ran desperately into the streets but couldn't escape Yasuko. Fortunately, Issei also had a sword, or he would have had to endure a kiss from the old lady. Back to Ri, one moment she was fine, and the next, she was in excruciating pain, her wristband broken. While her friends worried about her, Ri turned into a demon. The supervisor, distracted on his phone, didn't notice until it was too late. By the time he reached for his gun, Ri had already slaughtered her two friends and the doctor. Shin, wanting to see his sister, also arrived at the scene, but all he found were lifeless bodies and endless pools of blood. Issei, disheartened by Yasuko's situation, went to a bar, not expecting to encounter the killer of his sister there. To his dismay, she even offered him a farewell drink with a hint of lemon. Just as he was uncertain what to do next, a glass of wine was thrown his way. Expecting a beautiful woman, Issei was surprised to find it was Yasuko. He ran for his life, leaving the girl to search for him once more. His shiny, attractive hair made Issei an appealing target. Suddenly, he found himself trapped between two women, the overweight woman and the killer of his sister. Facing a difficult choice, he stood behind the more attractive woman. Fortunately, Yasuko, being a chrysalis, was easily dealt with. However, Issei's words could not be taken back, and he accepted a kiss from his sister's killer as an affirmation of their love. Not far away, reappeared in her familiar park and began attacking people. Guy hesitated to attack due to uncertainty about her true nature. Pushed down, retransformed back into her human form. Shin arrived soon after and mistakenly thought Guy intended to harm his sister. After spending a passionate night, Issei was shocked to realize what he had done with his sister's killer. Fulfilling his dream, he felt obligated to reciprocate. Battles raged everywhere. Unable to defeat Guy, Shin felt helpless and couldn't focus on the fight as Ri fled. Just when Issei thought he had frozen the woman, she shattered the ice, transforming into a Busoma with a bow in hand. Luckily, Yasuko still didn't give up on her life's love. She forced Issei to choose between her and the monster. Reluctantly, he preferred the human, disrupting the love triangle. Angered, the Busoma no longer wanted to spare the overweight woman. Meanwhile, Shin, seeking his sister, was rejected by Ri, who cried and expressed hatred towards him. She didn't want Shin to see her in that state. Regarding the intense love triangle, Issei, on the brink of transforming into a Busoma due to rage, held back. Yasuko didn't want him to lose there. She used her ultimate weapon to suffocate Issei and then attacked the other woman. As the Busoma was thrown back, Yasuko grabbed Issei and fled. Two figures, devoid of clothing, lay scattered on the ground. Issei, having faced numerous ordeals, gradually came to accept his reality. He preferred staying with Yasuko over becoming a monster. However, not everyone was lucky enough to have a choice. Shin was worried that his sister Ri was hiding something from him. It seemed Guy was also looking for something on Ri. Caught up in his thoughts, Shin forgot about breakfast. When the butler came to tease him, Shin unexpectedly lashed out, frightening the butler. It appeared Shin might never return to his former self. Sayaka, nearly recovered, overheard a conversation between her father and his disciple. Amon had given Shiryu to Guy to sever its bond with his daughter. Unable to sit still and recover, Sayaka became frantic, wanting to leave the hospital as soon as possible. Even when Shin mentioned their shared bloodline, Sayaka stated she didn't care. She thanked Shin and left him, causing him to feel dejected and walk away. Sayaka still held on to the sword that Guy had sharpened. Amon returned home and retrieved Tamagain, a stone left by the moon god capable of destroying the demon sword. Determined to break the link between Guy and Shiryu, he planned to forge a weapon from it. After some consideration, Shin decided to return to Shashidai, aspiring to become a chrysalis and eradicate malevolent forces. Although his father didn't want to lose his son, he had no other choice. He was currently searching for Ri, with the only clue being a video of a beast attacking the doctor. Suddenly, a Busoma alert appeared on the screen, revealing the culprit to be Kiramaru. Having lost his friend, Kiramaru had gone insane. Upon seeing Shin, Kiramaru reverted to human form. His actions were driven by the belief that people had treated Guy poorly. Reading the boy's mind, Shin decided to sheath his sword, declaring that he would become Kiramaru to save Guy. Shin manipulated Kiramaru into choosing to fight with his old friend. Meanwhile, Shin's father, the man behind Shashidai, now deemed everyone there worthless and sought to take over himself. However, the truth about Prismuffin was revealed. It only decreased maldition levels, allowing Busoma to revert to human form. However, if they get injured, they will permanently become Busoma. At this moment, Matoba no longer hides his ambition. For him, the true victors are the Busoma. Despite his wife being killed by a monster, Matoba venerates the Busoma. This had been his plan from the beginning. The two leaders, unable to digest this shock, were quickly killed. Matoba seemed on the verge of reaching the pinnacle of science, with humanity's extinction only a few days away. Sayaka's only hope was for her Guy to return. She remembered always finding him, no matter where he hid. But now, Guy had disappeared without a trace. Following the knife's guidance, Sayaka searched for Guy, sensing a lingering connection between them. After the recent events, Himiko hadn't returned to the mountain. She needed to eliminate Guy first for peace of mind. While conversing, Himiko realized the wind had stopped, signifying the battle of two super strong Busomas. Shin was immediately informed of this. When Himiko arrived, Guy declared the entity within him no longer existed. She dealt with Jeskos first, and then turned to Guy. A person can absorb Sage Alma only once in a long period. Guy decided to spare them, but Shin attacked. Kiramoru also transformed into a Busoma to assault Guy. But regardless, Guy was still his friend. Unable to bear it, Shin turned to question Kiramoru, who then rushed to kill Guy himself. This time, Sayaka intervened. Even after being stabbed by Guy, she believed he could return. Embracing Guy, Sayaka begged him to come back. Frustrated, Shin yelled out, unable to surpass Guy. Guy, indifferent to the sideline drama, pushed Sayaka towards Shin. Unexpectedly, Ri flew in to attack him. Not recognizing her, Shin stabbed the monster, only to find he had killed Ri, who reverted to her human form on his sword. Everyone turned to look at Shin. Panicked and screaming in agony, he transformed into a Busoma, calling all other Busomas to witness. They clashed in battle. Kirimaru, carrying Ri, ran ahead. Sayaka, sensing the danger, refused to leave. She took out the knife Guy had given her and stabbed him, hoping it would awaken him. Surprisingly, Guy screamed in pain. Afterwards, Guy returned to being a normal human. This was the perfect moment for the two Shiryu swords to unite. Injured, Guy could only flee first. Sayaka was taken by Himeko for treatment. As Zolchuan was battling Shin, Grims intervened, giving Himeko the opportunity to take Sayaka away. Himeko thanked Sayaka and advised her to rest a bit longer. Meanwhile, Amen, unaware of his daughter's situation, had finished sharpening Tamagain, a sword capable of slaying demons in legends. He intended to use the sacred sword to kill the demon Shiryu. However, when they arrived, Miura appeared unafraid even when confronted with his saintly reflection. Kaijitsu, calm and collected, approached and spoke to them. Having realized life's morals at his age, Kaijitsu faced Zolchuan, who couldn't bear the truth and attempted to attack. However, Amen quickly intervened, severing one of Zolchuan's arms with a single stroke. Mikazuki dissolved Zolchuan with one hit, but it absorbed the sword and turned into a pure blue light that ascended to the sky. Amen was despondent for losing Mikazuki in a fleeting moment. After being taken care of, Sayaka fully recovered. She spoke about her relationship with Guy, not related by blood but like family. She was also curious about Himiko, and the weapons she wielded, a power not commonly known. Shin's rampage was closely observed by his father, who was pleased that his son had become a Busoma. He activated all the chrysalises in hibernation. Shoshidai was now nothing but a tomb of happiness. For a complete Busoma, chrysalises weren't a threat. Matoba, once terrified of Busoma, now revered them, considering their existence inevitable. He believed both Shin and Ri had the potential. Fortunately, Shiryu chose Shin as its host. Ri was just less lucky, becoming an artificial Busoma. Facing his ruthless father, Shin didn't hesitate to stab him. Nothing could sadden him anymore, not even his father's death. On the other hand, Himiko was astonished by her first interaction with the human world. There was no TV or karaoke in the temple, and Sayaka enthusiastically shared these experiences. She had also once forced Guy to do many such things with her. The two grew closer as they talked more. Ri was taken by Kirimaru to a safe place. However, before she could wake up, Guy appeared. He didn't come to harm them, but to apologize to Kirimaru. Perhaps destiny didn't allow Guy to endanger this young man. Sayaka showed Himiko the knife Guy had sharpened for her. Holding the knife, she happily thought of Guy. Sayaka's pure affection surprised Himiko. Clearly, both girls had feelings for the same boy. After their conversation, Sayaka, exhausted, fell back asleep. After gathering Moon's soul energy, Zolchuan sought Grimm's, looking for answers about the saint. Zolchuan had discovered emotions through human strength, but Grimm's dismissed it. Even Himiko felt a slight tremor within her. Zolchuan, for betraying Grimm's, was destroyed by him, with fragments of the moon also entering his body. Cities continued to be destroyed. Guy sought Himiko, asking her to destroy him, but Himiko insisted Guy was human and only cared that he returned. The pain made Guy regain consciousness, but if he healed, he could only turn into a Busoma again. Himiko promised to destroy him next time. While they were talking outside, Sayaka approached. Himiko left, allowing the couple some time alone. This time, Guy didn't push Sayaka away but embraced her. They discussed Shin and how to bring him back, but darkness had engulfed him. Guy credited his survival to Sayaka's constant support. Only she knew Guy had used his goodness to save himself. Sayaka wanted Guy to return to her. They would eat and talk together like before, watch the sunset, and pretend as if nothing had happened. Although he wanted to, Guy couldn't do it. He needed to understand his existence before dying. Their brief, beautiful moment was shattered as Shin stabbed Guy and took Sayaka away. When Guy opened his eyes, only Himiko and Kazumo were with him. Despite the pain, he was determined to find Sayaka. Himiko weariedly advised him not to go, but Guy refused to heed her pleas, intent on protecting Sayaka. Realizing she couldn't stop him, Himiko transferred some of her strength to him. As Guy left, tears streamed down Himiko's cheeks. Wounded by a weapon, she ran away in fear, not wanting Kazumo to see her. It seemed that Himiko had developed feelings for Guy. Her once empty shell, now filled with emotions, could no longer contain her weapon. Calmly, Kazumo came to embrace Himiko, sharing the intense pain they both felt. When Sayaka awoke, she immediately demanded Shin to return her body to her, insisting the Shin she knew was kinder than this cruel version. The stabbing pain made Shin uncomfortable, prompting him to withdraw the sword. Ultimately, he only caused Sayaka to faint, not killing her. Afterward, Shin and Guy found each other, marking a time when darkness and light merged. The birth of Busashin was imminent. This battle would determine the fate of humanity. The two swordsmen fiercely attacked each other, darkness spreading everywhere, even where Kiromaru and Ri were. Feeling her brother's presence, Ri dropped her cup of noodles and ran. Grimm's, not far away, waited for one of them to transform into a Busoma. At this moment, Sayaka ran to stop the two men. To protect her, Guy didn't hesitate to leave the battle. Shin, torn between his human side and the sword, struggled with rising jealousy. Overwhelmed by memories, he lost control, but seeing Guy, he dove down, intent on killing his enemy. However, Grimm's, impatient, took Sayaka and slashed her, triggering an explosive reaction from both men. They furiously attacked Grimm's. Seeing her brother in danger, Ri transformed into a monster to aid Shin, and Kiromaru joined in to help Ri, but they were quickly overpowered. Unable to bear the sight, Shin rushed up and stabbed Grimm's, with Guy cleaving off his head. Grimm's growing resentment finally achieved what he desired. Shin, now a Busoma, continued the fight. Their light attracted the people, who were immediately turned into demons by the encroaching darkness. Fortunately, Sayaka was still alive. Kuromaru and Ri stayed close to protect her in the tumultuous battle. As the fight neared its end, Guy was struck and fell. In that moment, he thought of his master and Sayaka, who were always waiting for him to come home. In that moment, the two young men met. Shin accepted that he could not become Busashin to save humanity. Before leaving, he turned to Guy and asked him to take care of Sayaka. Then Shin extended his hand to receive Guy's sword. Now, even the Busoma had developed emotion. Ri silently watched her brother dissolve into nothingness. In the time that followed, peace returned. Dai visited his mother's grave and continued to learn the craft at his master's house. After mastering it, he was entrusted with the Shiryu sword. Now it was no longer a source of fear for Guy, but had become his companion, and that marked the end of the movie.